I believe that any successful human being has the four key pillars of success are hard work, organization, perfectionist, and prudence. And prudence is the ability to make the right decision. And it's so difficult when you're on this path of building something unique for yourself and for the world to find that prudence. But Nadine here has set up, allows us to give a little bit more of clarity on what we're missing as individuals so that we can counteract that stress or those mental issues that come up before they become a major problem, which is super powerful. Hello and welcome to the Art of Kaizen for Entrepreneurs podcast, where we discuss how to grow 1% every day in both business and in self. Today we have Nadine Loaches, the owner of MindArch Health, a company that is using preventive models in mental health care to address primary prevention, value-based care protocols, and improve patient and client outcomes in the short and long term. Founded in 2019, MindArch's journey has been driven by a passionate commitment to revolutionizing the approach to mental health and social impact. Excited to be here about how Nadine developed her company and is helping the world be 1% better every day. Thank you, Nadine, for joining me today.
Thank you, Kyle. I'm really happy to be here. Appreciate that intro.
Yeah, no problem whatsoever. It's, you know, I luckily enough, my father became a therapist midlife. So I was about 18, 19 years old, and I watched him go through that process of becoming a therapist. And to learn the concepts around the individual mind, how the emotions work with the mental process, and how perception and perspective are vastly different for each human being, allowed me as an entrepreneur now to really understand people a little bit better. And as a marketer, I think it's a necessity to understand psychology to really go anywhere. So I'm very interested in talking to you. I'm very excited to hear how this business came to be, how you're helping people, and really just a background of where your education and knowledge came from. Can you start off with your knowledge base, where you came from, and again, how this business came to be?
Yeah, sure. I love that background with your father because I think it does give you a unique perspective on mental health. That'll really that shapes probably a lot of what you do. So that's really interesting. Yeah. So for me, I worked for about 20 years in social and behavioral services in the community programs like domestic violence, child welfare, neurodevelopmental disorders, comorbid psychiatric problems. So, really pretty high risk, high need areas of mental and behavioral health care. And throughout that process, so most of those was community based work. I'm a licensed clinical social worker. And my training before that was in behavior analytics. And so that just means that we use behavior data to shape the decisions that we make for these patients and clients in order to improve outcomes. And so throughout that kind of transition from behavior analytics and behavioral therapy to psychotherapy and working in these really high risk communities, there was just this sort of back of my mind drawing me back to prevention. I had this really short internship during my master's in preventive care. I actually begged for this internship, which had to draw me away from the therapeutic behavioral care that I was doing. And that was a really high need area. So I had to, really get this time within my workday and while doing my master's. People who do their master's in social work understand that you have to do a practicum while most of us are working and trying to, get your hours and also going to school. It's really like a crazy couple years. And so during this, I grabbed this practicum in prevention. So it's in the back of my mind how much easier the work was and how much more rewarding it was when we were looking at things before everything was in crisis. And so we really had this cool opportunity. Fast forward to a role that I had in I became the head of school for a school where there was children with serious neurodevelopmental disorders, and they had mental health and psychiatric issues as well. So couldn't be served by the district, had to be in a really specialized school setting. I was ill-equipped for this role. I was previously behavior analyst, counselor, understood all of that, became head of school. And I was pregnant at the time, and there was a serious incident that happened where I was kicked in the stomach. My child is fine. He's thriving. That is always everybody's first concern. But the reason it really shaped the business is it brought me back in that moment to prevention. I really can't be in these crisis incidents anymore. And how can we get ahead of these things? And so I drew from those principles. We shifted our entire team from this really crisis intervention model with these high risk students to a preventive approach. And now all of those principles are now what we call the business behind MindArch Health. And we went from at that time we went from 7 incident reports a day to I went on maternity leave, had a successful delivery. My son is doing well. But the following year, we had 7 total incident reports. So we call it like a 7 to 7. People love to talk about transformations. This was a big one. And so it became the backbone. So I didn't start a business right away because I didn't know how to start a business. I chickened out a couple times. I took some other really, really big roles. We moved back from California to New York, and there was a lot going on, but in the back of my mind, I was developing sort of how would this be if I were to create a business around this? And ultimately that became I took some time off, I did some research, put all those principles. There's a ton of research on this. What are the proactive factors that we could measure before there are social behavioral, mental health crises? How could we measure and address them beforehand? Conducted the research 2019 to 20 just before the pandemic, through the pandemic, and then bootstrapped that, then incorporated, went through this, kind of incubator NIH challenge through the Center for Advancing Innovation, understood how to run a business, and then launched that in 2023 and put all of that into a software tool, pulling on my behavior analytic background. And so now the data analytics informs exactly how we can reduce risk, prevent, and promote mental well-being before there are ever any symptoms. And we can do this population-wide. So long story, but this is sort of how we got to where we are today.
Hey, everybody. I hope you're enjoying the contents. Just want to take a quick intermission to address the business owners watching this right now. I have been in the marketing industry for over a decade, and I have found that there is two major things that I am trying to help the world understand. One, there's a common denominator to success. Every successful business has the same foundational structure built out, and we'd love to be able to support and understanding what that foundation is. And two, 90% of marketing agencies screw you over for one clear identifier, and that is data. Only 3% of consumers are ready to purchase today. The other 97% are being nurtured by your advertising dollars and advertising spend. We created Kaizen Marketing Agency to give you ownership of not only the customers that you're getting through your front door, but also the ownership of your data and understanding what actually grows your business and giving you the control to be able to grow it. My goal personally is to be one of the best marketers in the world. And the only way to do that is to help as many businesses as I possibly can actually grow their company. Not just sell Facebook ads or Google ads, but put a service together that gives you ownership and growth. So I hope you enjoy this content. If you're loving it, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. And if you really want to know more about how to grow your company and you want a free audit and game plan, we'll hand you the keys to the kingdom of how to be successful. Click the link below. We'll do a 15-minute audit. First 10 minutes, we'll really break down your business. Last 5 minutes, we'll show you those common denominators that you need to be successful for your company and how to implement it into your business. If you want to put in a sweat equity and do it yourself, take our information and run. If you don't want to deal with the headache, that's when you hire us. Incredible story. I mean, in the development of how you have, would you say it's the courage to start the business, the knowledge to start the business? What was it that got you over that hump of the fear?
Yeah, it was both things. So I think, sometimes you wait until you really have something that stuck. And so there were two things. I think I got so frustrated with the way things, were in that industry, that I was ready to say, well, if it's not me, then who is it going to be? So there's a little bit of courage of why should I be the one to do this? And so that was part of it. And then the other piece was, um, that I had learned certain skills in my last role that I had. I was president of strategic development for an integrative psychiatric practice. I had come up with a new integrative model, launched it, scaled it. Was almost a little too easy. It scaled really quick and it went really well. The challenging part of that was I had to learn how to run a business in those 2 years. And I think that was just enough for me to be like, oh, I know how now to run all of these little pieces of the business aspect of it, market something new, create partnerships, all of that great stuff. And so I think it was a little bit of both.
Great advice and great background to it. What does the business look like today? Talk to me a little bit about who are you serving, kind of what the business looks like, employee size, products, things of that nature.
Yes. So in 2023, We did some design work. We launched this software tool, which is called the MindArch Health Automation Pathway. And so it does that roadmap that I was talking about assessing and addressing those mental health preventive factors in advance and being able to address those. And so we launched that with a design partner. We piloted with a couple universities and campuses last year, and then we just officially really launched into sales. So you're catching it at a really pivotal growth time for us. We have a very small team. We've been a founding team of 4, and we have 10 interns from Stony Brook University, and we use those interns really strategically to support this early phase when we bootstrapped everything and just tried to be as lean as possible. And yeah, it's been a really great process. And I think as we grow, we have some people that will add on, but this has been a nice, small, intimate team so far.
Of that. So you, through your knowledge and through your background, you developed this survey style of products that you're able to actually address the potential threats that could be happening, potential, let's say, mental problems that could be happening with students specifically. Are you working with students?
Yeah, so well, in the higher education sector, yes, we're assessing students. We also assess faculty and staff. There's a direct correlation between student well-being and how faculty and staff are doing. And same with any support provider, so providers of healthcare as well, to how patients will do. There are some really good studies on that. And so we do try, if possible, to also survey faculty and staff. And we're looking at psychological health. So instead of measuring those factors like symptoms of mental illness or risks of mental illness, we're actually looking at 2 things. We're looking at social determinants of health, so things that would put someone more at risk. So financial hardship, or maybe a cognitive disability like dyslexia, or you having a childhood abuse and neglect history. So things like that, or a serious life event that might have, shaken up what's going on in their life. And so we're looking at these social determinants of health. We're also looking at these psychological health factors, key factors that are what should our mental health look like, instead of saying just the absence of illness is wellness, which we know is not true. So just not being mentally ill does not mean you're mentally well. And we've said, well, there must be these key factors that then we can measure there. So that's where our research came in. And then we also measure what's called protective factors, which these are the things that are basically buffer against stress. So if you're stressed, and we all have things that are going to be very stressful and challenging to us. So we wanted to know, like, well, two people can go through the same thing. Somebody copes well and somebody doesn't. What's the difference? And so we found out all those factors and we measure those. And so if we can put into place these stress coping factors in advance, we know that no matter what happens in your life, you're going to cope better. Your psychological health will be better, and you're less likely to develop stress related diseases and disorders. So not just mental health problems, but things like diabetes, heart disease, and other preventable disorders.
Can you dive into that a little bit? Because I've through my father's learning, I've always tried to pick this apart in my own brain of how the differentiation of human beings, even let's say twins that I grew up in the same environmental structure, can have such vastly different concepts and perspectives of the same actions that happen to each one of them. And my hypothesis, I guess you would say, was it was the emotional tie back during that moment that caused their mentality to develop that way. AKA, it was the one person well fed and they didn't have any stress or any problems in their mind. So when the action happened, it wasn't as big of a catalyst, I guess you could say. And the other person might have had something happen to them earlier where they were stressed and they had a mental fatigue on their mind, or they had maybe a physical fatigue from hunger or thirst that caused it. So there was more of an emotional turmoil during that moment. What are some of those things? Am I on the right pace? Am I way off? What are some of those identifiers that you guys have found?
Yeah. It's really cool to think about. So, yes, there are the factors that might be in place from an internal level. So, you talked about maybe like hydration, right? Are they, well hydrated, like nutrients, all of that good stuff. So, that's one piece we call regulation in the 5 elements that we measure. And then there's other internal things. So the 5 elements are secure, regulated, valued, decided, and related. But basically what it is there's factors that make us feel psychologically secure and safe. If those are in place, we're better. We're more psychologically healthy. We're more regulated, emotionally regulated. This involves all of those neurobiological and neuropsychological factors, everything from how we process sensory information, and somatic reactions, our nervous system, and all that good stuff. And then we have the value-based element, which is how we feel about ourselves from an internal standpoint, right? And so that might be different between those twins. Decision is about self-efficacy. Do we feel like we can make decisions that are good for us and healthy decisions? And then related. So how do we relate to that problem? How do we relate to others and those kinds of things? So that's internally, but then the external things that you're talking about are the protective factors. So what kinds of things make us feel secure in the environment? Do we have protection? Do we feel safe? Do we feel calm? Do we have a sense of belonging and connection? And a lot of things that people talk about. The regulation in the environment is like, well, if I'm at a rock concert, now I'm aging myself, but like if I'm at this crazy rock concert, that's great for a couple hours. But if that was, playing while I'm trying to take a test, very different scenario, right? And so what are these kinds of impact, sensory impact, somatic impact on us on a day-to-day basis? Access to nature, natural light, all these kinds of really cool regulated things. From a value-based, it's everyone talks about social support. So did that one of those twins have some better social support right after that incident versus another who didn't have the same connection to a safe adult? Did they have did they create some sort of purpose or meaningful impact from that? And build some resiliency, right? So all of these kinds of really interesting things, make good decisions. Are they related? So we have we can measure the 5 elements both from an internal standpoint and the external standpoint. And then we change these external factors without having to go one by one and treat people in therapy. And then we have a natural benefit to everybody in the population by improving those things around them.
Incredible information and very insightful. I want to make sure that a lot of our listeners here are entrepreneurs and business owners, and we actually believe that in the world. I love Atlas Shrugs and that talks about the stress that business owners put on their shoulders to move the world forward every single day. And I truly believe that myself, you as a business owner, and most of us listening here, we deal with an immense level of stress on a regular basis. What are some of the things that you would recommend that we be looking at on a regular basis to help us put our mindset in a position to deal with the stress a little bit better, a preventive action to have in our mind to so that instead of looking for therapy in the late run, once we got to a point of complete burnout or in a complete distress, that we have in the back of our minds to identify the things that could be affecting us more.
Yeah, so the 5 element survey is free on our website, actually for individuals. You can go take it. I think there isn't a short answer, right? So for me, when I take it, I tend to score a little bit lower in the regulated element. I'm trying to do some yoga and some other things for myself, taking more walk. I'm at my desk a lot. I need to be taking more walks. I need to have access to natural light. I need to be doing all of those regulated things more regularly, including those more so that I can decrease my stress in that way. For other people, it might be a very different key factor and a very different element that comes up as the highest need. And so I would just take the survey. You can get your scores and think about then, from those, in those 5 elements where you can strengthen, do I need to feel a little bit more secure in what I'm doing? Do I need to have a greater sense of purpose or meaningful impact? Because sometimes we're just grinding it out and we're not seeing the results. And so that feels kind of frustrating and overwhelming. So it could be different for everyone. Sometimes it's like, am I making the right decisions? I don't know which path. There's a million paths to take. I only have so many advisors. Get to ask these questions too. Where do I go? So it could be different.
So we're gonna make sure that's added in the description below. As entrepreneurs and business owners, guidance, we're always looking for prudence. So I believe that any successful human being has the four key pillars of success are hard work, organization, perfectionist, and prudence. And prudence is the ability to make the right decision. And it's so difficult when you're on this path of building something unique for yourself and for the world to find that prudence. But Nadine here has set up, allows us to give a little bit more of clarity on what we're missing as individuals so that we can counteract that stress or those mental issues that come up before they become a major problem, which is super powerful. So my question to you is where's this going? You talked about this is just a launch. You've just recently launched the paid program. Where do you guys plan to go the next 6 months, the next year? Where is the company leading to?
Yeah, well, we're wanting to support more institutions. So really right now what we're looking for is higher education partners that want to improve the well-being of their students, faculty, and staff. There are so many downstream benefits for them that connect to their main goal, which is to educate these students well. And we know that it's directly correlated to that kind of performance. And we can think about ourselves when we're really stressed and overwhelmed and not doing well, we're not performing very well. And so that's an obvious one. And then also that they want these students to be engaged and they want to retain them so that they can get them, to graduation and successful careers. That helps their reputation, that helps them, maintain. And higher education is struggling right now because there are some institutions that are closing, and there's a real challenge to meet that need. And there's a big diversity change in education where they're having to really think about the demographics, diverse needs of their student body more so, and really get more precise. Where do we need to improve and strengthen? And I think that's where data analytics comes in because there's so many complex factors that you were talking about earlier. And if it seemed like I was rambling when we talked about the 5 elements, it's because there are 60 factors that we're measuring. There are a lot of things that we're looking at and the social determinants of health. And so taking all this complex data, we call it a socio-ecological approach because we're looking at the whole ecology of it and pulling it together to make these informed decisions. So we're trying to help more institutions improve that. And then we also launched into healthcare, which is really, really exciting. So we're helping primary care organizations improve their decision making around patients because in the world of value-based care, the way that these providers are getting paid is if their patients improve and don't have these serious medical interventions down the road. And so it's a real long game for them. And so they need to have the insights and predictions ahead of time who's going to have these higher level needs and who needs this intervention now and what do we do, what is going to be most effective. And so we're bringing all that research in and developing these really cool integrations into the population health tools that they have and getting them that informed decision making. So really, those are our two big pushes right now, exciting scaling times.
Super powerful. So not only helping school with the retention of their staff, but also retention of their students, and so that the students can actually learn better. This is, correct me if I'm wrong, but my father used to always quote that 7 minutes of stress, and stress is different for each one of us, right? It can be self-induced stress, it can be physical stress, whatever. But 7 minutes of stress can drop the IQ up to 50%, which can make any individual that is a rocket science into someone that is stumbling to figure out the next word to say. So the fact that you're able to identify both for the students and the staff on how they can be more, what do you say, more within themselves, happy within themselves and happy within their environment and less stress, so they're able to not only love their job if they're a staff, but focus on what their goal is as a student to become better. You're now working in with primary healthcare to help them get a better understanding of their patients for the long-term goal of solving the true issue that they're going after. Super powerful and a beautiful, beautiful attack on the world to help support it. And I love hearing it, right? I've watched my father's path as a child therapist and he worked with a few different other demographics. And I think the whole world needs a little bit of support and understanding that we don't live in a world where we're out on a farm and all we have to do is make sure there's food on the table for our wife and kids at the end of the day. There is so many factors that we deal with on a daily basis, from the noise of social media to the stresses of the world to this talk about financials nowadays. Stress can be built up very, very easily. So I think what you're doing is extraordinarily powerful. I like to pivot into you a little bit as an entrepreneur, if you don't mind. and talk about really some of the lessons that you've learned in building this business. As you said, you kind of went through a position in work that gave you the confidence to start the company. But since you've started building of this company, is there a challenge or a story or something that you can share with our listeners here that helped you structure confidence in how you're running the company and how you're developing it? Maybe a challenge or a setback that you had to overcome to make you into a better entrepreneur.
Yeah, there's so many. Where do I start with my failures? Actually, what's funny is that with right after I completed a lot of the research, I had connected with failure scientists. There's a small intimate group of failure scientists throughout the world. They're pretty well connected actually. Ended up presenting in at the Volkswagen Foundation in Germany on our failures. That was how connected I got with this group. And really fascinating stuff because it is a lot about, I know you've named your podcast the Kaizen framework, which is all about, this iterative planning and failing. Well, I like to talk about it as sort of failing forward. We call it fail forward to flex here, which means now we're just failing forward, but then we have to make some adaptations and use flexible thinking and change the way that we look at things and change the way we're likely to do things so we don't stay kind of rigidly attached to what we get comfortable doing. Yeah, and so we talked at this failure conference and about our one of the big challenges we had. So I did all this research. I had, no idea exactly how we could put this into a marketable solution. And the first iteration of that took almost a year, and I threw it all away. We scrapped the entire thing. So I think I told you, so 2019, 2020 research, one building out all this incredibly large toolbox on what the original 5 elements were when we first coded the research into themes, and then was not scalable, tested in the market. And so really what I realized is that you should probably do some better market research before you go and develop something. But it was really good information, but it was really just not scalable. So that was the biggest failure. And so what it really did teach me is everything that I think one of your big principles, which is before you go too far down any road, it's okay, what structure do we have around this? How are we going to test whether it's working or not? How are we going to make sure that we have some sort of a way of evaluating this, measuring it, tracking it, improving it over time? So we're not just kind of going with something for so long and just hoping that it takes off or improves or does what you think it's going to do. And so, yeah, maybe, learning the hard way in that sense.
And that's a great learning lesson. I mean, as you said, market research is very important. But, you know, Kaizen, I initially found the concept in the Art of War when I was a young kid, and I have sucked at everything that I started. I was never the type of individual that started off strong at anything that I did. But I don't give up, and I constantly push forward. And I realize that in business, it's much easier to take the first step today, and then if you trip and fall, to pick yourself up one step forward and keep on going than to never take the first step whatsoever. So I love that. And that falls right into my final question, Nadine. How do you find your Kaizen? You as an individual running a business, being an entrepreneur, trying to build this company up. What do you do on a daily basis as an individual to find that constant improvement, to be able to test new things in your business, to be able to have confidence in where you're going in the business, to be able to wake up every day with the energy and motivation to run the company? How do you find your Kaizen?
Well, that's a big question. I structure myself quite a bit. I don't know if this is really the answer that you're looking for, but I time block my entire calendar. So if you look at my calendar, it is color coded the entire day. And I have my home calendar. I have 2 kids. That is a very busy morning and evening job as well, and all of those things that go into that. And then on each of those time blocks, we've got, these projects. Everything is broken down by projects. And so we've got our main company KPI, and everything that we do rolls up to one mission, one goal, one KPI. So everyone's got all these KPIs. Yes, we've got these, things that we're trying to accomplish on these projects, but they have to drive this main thing that we're trying to do this year. So we've got our longer vision, but it's got to drive up to this year. And so every project we are working towards, how are we getting towards that project goal, and how's that project goal getting us towards this KPI? And so that allows us to constantly evaluate, track, iterate, move things forward. And then I think my own structure of making sure that we're, you know, time blocking and getting to all of these things helps me just stay really, really organized. And the more, these are the things that this is what I'm prioritizing for today. I still think of that. I don't know if you saw this like viral video a long time ago with a big rock, do the big rock first with the sand analogy. But I think this professor had, the listeners will correct me hopefully in the comments, but there's a professor that stood up and said, if you do all these little things you have to do first, you kind of pour in the sand in the jar and then you add these small rocks to try to get a little bit more done. By the time you get to your medium or big rocks for the day, you've kind of filled up this jar, and then showed the opposite and then was able to have more space. And I've taken that principle, I really run with it and been able to kind of have this big commitment. This is what I'm achieving this day, this week. And that, I don't know if that organization helps to folks, but really has helped drive me. And then the other big driver is I really want to accomplish this goal. I think it is critical that we are not waiting until people have symptoms and then treating them one-on-one. And we know that this is ineffective for them. It isn't helping people thrive and flourish in their lives. It isn't helping the organization, business, institution. It isn't helping healthcare. And really, overall, a really ineffective model, a medical model that we put onto mental well-being. And so I think the passion is behind all of that organization.
I love that. And the time blocks are super important. I mean, Steve Jobs used to talk about this time blocking for 15-minute blocks throughout his day and making sure he's organized for every moment of his day. And I think that's a huge thing for us as entrepreneurs because we can get lost in the sauce of business. There's a million things that we can do. And having that organization, especially if you guys can do it a day before, 2 days prior, gives you the moment to start action. And I think that's what the organization does, right? You look at your calendar and it's like, oh, 3 o'clock, I'm starting my study time. Well, then I actually start studying at 3 o'clock instead of avoiding it and putting the time back. Nadine, thank you so much. You were an awesome guest. I really do appreciate it. If people were looking to learn more information about your business and your service, how can they find you? How can they get connected to you?
I think for your group, connect with me on LinkedIn. I'd rather it be personal, right? You can go to our website, you can find out information. That's great, mindarchealth.com. But also connect with me on LinkedIn. Message me, tell me about your business. I love talking to people and getting to know what people are doing. If you're interested in this, ping me, ask me a question. I'll send some research your way, some articles, some information. I'm happy to share more about what we're doing. So if you feel like your business kind of dovetails with what we're doing, let me know. We're developing all sorts of really cool partnerships. So yeah, I think I'm pretty active on LinkedIn, and then our website can give some more context.
Some of that information is to be found below in the description. Nadine Loaches from MindArch Health. Thank you so much for your time. For the listeners, if you guys have made it to the end here, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll see you on the next Kaizen podcast.